Hello, YouTubers! I'm National Master Luke Calhoun. I'm a nationally board-certified teacher and entitled chess player, and I'm going over the Sicilian Defense today. Let's first start with kind of the strategies and the ideas behind the Sicilian, and then we'll go over some concrete variations, some like sidelines and main lines, so you can get kind of a feel for this opening and decide whether you'd want to play it with white or black. So, let's get into the details. So first, I'm going to talk about the themes and the strategies. Just like a bird's eye view of what's going on here. So what black wants to do when they play c5 is first of all stop white from playing d4. So against almost any other move, that would have been white's move. So like e6, d4, c6, d4, d6, d4. These are all the main lines. The only move that stops this is e5 and c5, the only moves, I should say. And the reason why they stop it is not directly, the queen's still guarding it, but the queen will have to be summoned in both of those lines. So like, for example, after c5, you could still play d4, but then they're going to summon the queen out, and then they're going to harass it. And this harassment is super annoying. I don't think white is worse by any means, but like their queen is out. And technically, a lot of white's advantage has dissipated after this move. Like black can play knight here, and they have two minor pieces out, and they're doing quite fine. Although they still have to know what they're doing because white has the center. So the idea is to kind of stop d4. And the other idea can be seen if I just play some random moves for white. So if I play, for example, I don't know, d3, knight c6, let's just show like one setup black has at their disposal, g6, castle kingside, bishop g2, and just say like here, knight f6, and then say like rook e1, castle kingside, h3, I'm just making random moves, a6, knight, I don't know, c4, b5, knight here. Okay, this is the point. White could have played a lot of things, but see that bishop raging on the long diagonal? That is a dragon, fire-breathing bishop, and the pawns will just swoop, swoop, swoop. Rooks will come over, and they will just eye menacingly down on the queen side. And then, the idea is black just wins. They win the endgame. And then it's just very hard for white to compete against this. So this like diagonal trick, and then everything goes this way. Everything just points that way. And then you play b5, b4 is really good if white doesn't know what they're doing. So like against all the out of book 1,900 rated players, I think 1,000 players aren't going to be out of book, but like maybe, 600 rated players, they're gonna die quickly because you're just gonna go like here, here, here. You fianchetto your bishop, and then you just start rolling the pawns on the queen side. And it's really annoying because white has a hard time fighting over here. They really can't fight. So like if they play like c4, then black can just live in this hole. And when white gets there, black will just say, get out. And so it's not even. So white can't like go back. And therefore black's gonna have this side, white's going to have this side, and it's going to be kind of a race. So white's going to have to go for like checkmate or something. And if they don't checkmate, they might be slightly worse on the queen side and have a really horrible position. And so that's very stressful because black can memorize a bunch of defensive setups against those checkmate threats and then just kind of be looming. And this is why it's a really great opportunity for black to play for a win. And that's why Gary Kasparov, Bobby Fischer, all these world champions have used the Sicilian defense in situations where they wanted to win as black. Additionally, compared to like e5, white can like attack, and it's black who has to kind of defend all the time. But with c5, there's just no easy way to attack this pawn. Like you can't just like move your knight here to attack it. And even if you could, it's so easy to defend. Black can play here to defend it, or e6. And it's flexible. Black has a lot of different follow-ups. So for example, same plan as before, like let's just say white's just kind of doing nothing. I can play in the center with e6, d5 instead of that other plan and just kind of build a mega center. And that's also good for black. So the fluidity of black being able to go here, here, or perhaps here, here, or perhaps here, here, or even here, here. Well, that's illegal, but here, here. All of that gives black like a flexibility where it's like it's really hard to pin them down and just know what we're up against as white. Because like black is just kind of morphing around a lot. And this allows for a lot of creativity in playing the black pieces too, because you can kind of mix it up, and white doesn't really know exactly. It makes it very hard for white to plan. Now, white is super flexible too. Like, all their pawns can do like whatever they want. This pawn can come here, this pawn can come here, this knight can come here, this knight can come here. Here. And this is why it's so hard to learn the theory of the Sicilian. It's just like a web of variations that can go down. And that's one of the reasons why I want to talk about strategy first. So let's talk about like the disadvantages of this move. So again, the pros is that black takes all this queenside space, and also stops white from playing d4, which would be their main queenside contesting move. The con, and this is a big one, is that other openings all help develop a knight or bishop on the first move. So like if you compare this to here, the bishop can come out now. So this pawn move aids the bishop. The French defense, same thing. The bishop is aided by the French defense. The Caro, no, but that's another deal. D6, the perk, the bishop is coming out. So almost all these moves have a virtue of helping a bishop come out. And the Sicilian just says, I'm sorry, minor pieces, you're going to have to stay home for a little bit. and black was already a tempo down. So black, is already playing second player. So like white's going to be able to play first. So like after here, black can keep up for a little while, but eventually white's going to sling this bishop out, and black will not be able to sling their bishop out back without wasting another tempo with a center pawn move. And so that is black's disadvantage. So why is black willing to put up with it, and how should white try to treat this? So black's reasoning is because the pawns can't trade or anything, it's not really easy for white to punish them. They can't like just trade in the center because the pawns aren't quite touching. And so there's no way to like explode open the position super easily for white. And because of this, black reasons they can get away with it. So for example, white could play a move like c3, and this would all be well and good to kind of open up the position, but c3 is not a developing move. So then they would have lost their big plus in playing against the Sicilian. So instead, the main line is usually seen after knight f3, and black has a number of choices, but let's keep it at d6 for a second. Pawn to d4 is the idea, and white's idea here is to avoid that scary variation I just talked about by opening the position. When you have more minor pieces out than black, you want to open everything up so that the one tempo matters. When the pawns have been traded in the center, that little detail of I have out an extra knight will make a bigger deal because all the attacks are speedier when the board is clear. It's like when everything can see each other, the attacks can come really fast. And that's why white often goes to open up the center. And black kind of has to oblige, because this in-game is not very good for black because white can just pick on the c-pawn and white has a better center. So usually they have to take, and then white will take back. And then at this point, white has a threat, which is to play c4 and kind of clamp down to make sure black can't ever push any other pawns in the center. And then after c4, black won't even have much of a queenside advantage anymore. It'll just be like white has kind of more space everywhere. And so for that reason, black often plays knight f6 to attack the pawn and also indicate that they could play d5 later. And then white not wanting to give back the development of their move, and they have to be careful, like bishop d3 is possible, but then this knight will be hanging and allow black to tempo off of it. So they usually play knight c3, knights before bishops, guarding the pawn. And then this is like a main line of the Sicilian, and I just kind of want to talk about what's going on here now. So I talked to you about why white would want to do this. They've exploded open the position. They still have a lead in development, and they lost a little bit of tempos playing d4 and taking back with the knight because the knight was already developed. So now black has, in a way, caught up because they can develop two. However, they're still down this bishop, and d4 at least helped get out this. So they're not completely like caught up. They're still struggling. They're still a little on the struggle bus. And it might surprise you to note that black's main move here, the knight orf, is a6, another non-developing move, which I will explain when we get to the knight orf chapter, but I just want to explain like the ideas here. So black's idea is that their open file is better than white's open file, because white's open file, the D file with these pawns traded, hits a pawn that's just well defended. It's not easy to attack that pawn. It's not really going to do much to attack that pawn. So there is something to be said about this open D file, but according to black's, best argument, the C file is more important. And the C file is nice because if they put a rook there, just imagine there's a rook here. You can play like A6, B5, the pawn attacks the knight moves, and then we just like go full on attacking the C pawn. And not only that, but this knight is really critical because if this knight moves, the E pawn will also be attacked. So white has to kind of babysit this center pawn the whole game and worry about an assault down the C file. That's kind of depressing for white long term, is that this is going to give black a lot of initiative. Additionally, if you count the center pawns, black has 2, white has only 1. So theoretically, that means that black should have a bigger center and more space in the long run. So like they could play like E6, D5 one day, or E5, D5, and just have an extra pawn in the center, just kind of holding back white's pieces, and they can try to squeeze white a little later in the game. So this is like an existential threat for white. This is why a lot of white players do not like slow playing this, and just lolly-dolly-da, castle kingside, I don't care about anything, bishop d2, bishop e3. And this is why black players love this when white doesn't know theory, because, if white doesn't do something, black often is equal and sometimes even better. Sometimes better. And white has to be very, very careful not to just be worse as a result of this C-file pressure and the attack on the E-pawn. Additionally, black can come out this way or come out this way. So they're super flexible in terms of how they're going to react. And that gives them more defensive opportunities against white's setup. Okay, what does white have? White has the extra tempos, right? The extra minor pieces. And temporarily, at least, they have the bigger center. So I know black got the long run big center, but the short run big center belongs to white. And because white has so many pieces out, black is not ready to fight white in the short run. And for this reason, white usually tries to do something with the energy of their position. This is why e4 is often, played by attacking players instead of like in-game players, is because white really doesn't want to go into an in-game here. White wants to checkmate. And to make that more possible, white will often want to castle queenside, because if black castles queenside, they're going to feel breezed. There's this wide open line here that might be super scary for them. And they wouldn't like it. They don't have as much pawn cover. And if black castles this way, then it'll be kind of nice for white because there's no in-game. We're gonna try to checkmate each other. And checkmating each other means that tempos matter, which means time matters, which means white's extra tempo matters. And so that's why often against the Sicilian, you'll see a ton of players as white castle the opposite way as black to try to make that tempo the deciding factor of the game instead of this maneuvering game that could go into an endgame. So that's the basic idea. Is white has speed, black has long-term static considerations. And that's the Sicilian defense in a nutshell. Okay, let's get into some concrete variations, and we'll start with sidelines, and then I'll build up to the main line. Now, because the Sicilian is so much work, there's basically 2 players that should play it as club players. People who don't mind just getting trounced in the opening every so often and just kind of want a fun game. The Sicilian is wild. It is fun. You will get trounced if you play it, and if you play it against it, because it's just it's a wild ride, and there's just too much to remember. There's just a lot that you can do. And therefore, sidelines are one way for white to kind of avoid it. And none of the sidelines are particularly scary for black if you're thinking about playing it as black, but they are all dangerous. And this is what's kind of a bummer with playing the Sicilian, is you have to know all these sidelines. So one sideline, for example, is b4. This is tactical. The idea is to take your pawn. It's pretty crude. If you take back, then white gives you another pawn. And they're kind of hoping that if you take back, that they will play here. And just note, in red are the undeveloped pieces for black. and then look at white's pieces. White's pieces are going to come here. This pawn is going to be under attack with this nice rook. The bishop can slide out. The pawn can be completely, you can control the center. This bishop will get to this diagonal before black can, and white has terrific compensation. The computer says that things are fine, but in actual practice, I would say it's more fun to play white, and it's very hard to play black. That's why a lot of grandmasters have preferred d5 in this position instead of getting greedy. And the idea is that if they take back the queen, it's annoying for white because they want to play knight c3 to hit the queen, but this pawn's guarding it. And if they take back the pawn, which is what they want to do, then check and kill the rook will lose a whole rook. So they have to like annoyingly guard against the check. And then black can play a move like e5 and guard the pawn with their bishop. It's still not over after takes. I think like Bronstein played like the move rook a3, which is just crazy with the idea of like sacrificing the exchange to try to do a royal fork, and things got crazy. But I would say this position is about equal. If you don't mind sacrificing a pawn, it's good, and it makes sense. Like, why is it only equal? Why is white not losing? Well, the reason is because it's taking advantage of black's problems. Black didn't develop pieces, and white is hyper accelerating piece developments, and so the idea is that, you know, it's kind of sound. Another idea is d4. This is known as the Smith-Morra Gambit, and you could, of course, take back with the queen. I already talked about that, but the Smith-Morra Gambit happens after c3, and white's doing the same thing. They're just hyper accelerating their piece development. So the idea is the bishop can come here, the knight can come here, the bishop can come here, and white can use the open c file and the open d file. So now black doesn't have any c-file pressing, and white can try to make something of even more tempos than in the open Sicilian. I think this is equal. Some people think that there's like a way out for black, which maybe there is, but it's so hard to memorize, I would say, like in practice. We're about even. So for example, an easy way to die as black would be like knight c6, knight c3, knight here, bishop c4, and knight f6, which is a mistake. And white can play here. And this is just a shock. Like, it looks like you can't get away with that. It's like guarded too. So you take, and they trade queens. And the idea is if you take here, then they can bishop takes f7, or even better, knight g5, and it's just so annoying to defend that pawn, which will result in other problems. So typically knight takes, but then knight g5, threatening the other fork. And I've even had a game where I won once where they like tried to guard against the fork, and then check, mate. It's a pretty horrible way to die. Of course, black should be better than this, than just willy-nilly knight f6. There are many other moves, e6, a6, including g6, bishop g7 setups. Lots of things black can try against the Smith-Morra. Some people think that some of those tries are like refuting the Smith-Morra. I do not agree. I think white always has something, and it's really annoying. I would not recommend going into the Smith-Morra unless you've studied it like crazy for black. The best way to decline it, and the most annoying reason not to play it, is that black can play knight f6 and attack this pawn. And white doesn't seem to have anything better than e5, knight d5. And then we enter a variation of the c3 Sicilian, where white was forced to play d4 early. And it's trendy to not play d4 so early. Like if we like take back the pawn here, white can actually delay it with knight f3 first, but I'll just indicate this. Usually white has wanted to play bishop c4, and it's fine. This position is playable for white, but not at all exciting. And white had tried to sacrifice a pawn, but after like d6 later, we can even play d6 now. Black gets a very fine game like knight c6, and it's just not very fun for white because they sacrificed a pawn. So I think this is what I would play as them. The nice thing about it is that if they play the d5 and the c3 Sicilian, so let's just like really quickly, c3, knight f6, e5, knight d5 is a line, okay? And so is d5, takes. And I'll talk about this in just a second, but I just want to talk about the Smith-Morra for seconds before getting into this because I want to compare. So after c3, d5, takes, the knight can come to c3 and hit the queen. And that's really important in an advantageous way for white, because in the c3 Sicilian, which I'll talk about next, black typically wants to delay exchanging on d4 to not let that knight into the game. And so white has kind of tricked black into an advantageous d5. So if you know that against c3, they like to play d5, the Smith-Morra is a really good opening, because like it's hard for them to decline it. And if you know they like to play against c3, knight f6, Smith-Morra is much less good, because that's a great way to decline it, and you end up getting them, what they wanted anyway. Okay, let's go into, so I went over the Smith-Morra and the Wing Gambit. Let's go over like quieter setups for white. The one big one is c3. And this idea is to like play d4, and if black just kind of complies, white will just be better. So takes, and then white has a huge center, and they can just develop their pieces easily. There's no c-file advantage for black. We're even on the c-file, and there's no extra pawn for black in the center, and so all of black's Sicilian advantages are gone, and white is better. In fact, in 186 master games, white has won 68%. Black has only won 16% after this. That's why c3 is a great move, I think, for club players, because black has to know their stuff, or you'll just trade in the center. But let's talk about like why c3 is not the main line. Well, one, it wastes the tempo, and two is it occupies a super important square for the knight. So because it occupies a super important square for the knight, that's why you will get a move like d5. Because after pawn takes pawn, queen takes pawn, the knight can't go to c3. It's just so annoying. And so the queen, even though it looks developed super early, is unattackable, really. I mean, you could play c4 and attack it, but that's not a developing move to attack it. And you're going to have a backward d-pawn for a little bit. And so actually black is clearly better if you play a move like this. And so this is not very fun. So instead you could take, and then usually you play something like d4. And black has been shown to be fine. They'll play like a move like knight f6. And notice, since they haven't traded yet, you do not have knight c3. Super, super annoying. Now, I think this position is totally playable for white. They have to know some theory, and know like bishop e3 is a move, knight f3 is another move, and then after a move like e6, I think the main line goes knight a3. There's a lot of different lines to play knight here and knight here, and like knight c6 and bishop e3, and I think white has a little bit of a pull. But you do have to, like, this is not an easy development, and if you're playing the black side, it's nice to test, but you kind of have to know it. These positions tend to peter out because eventually there's an exchange in the center at the top level, and then it's a draw. So, for example, Carlsen Gukesh had this position, and it was a draw in 2023, and just looking over quickly the list of games, I'm seeing a whole lot of draws. But that said, both sides can lose if they don't know it, because things are a little crazy right now. And so d5 is a good way to play below the grandmaster level, and c3 is a good test because black really has to know what they're doing. Knight f6 is the other idea, because you want to guard this pawn with knight c3. But again, the c3 pawn is guarding it. So you've got it now, if you play d3 to guard it, well, then you're not going to play d4, which was the whole idea of c3. So bishop d3 would block the d4 pawn, and you don't want to move your queen out early, so that it's annoyingly, you have to play e5, and the knight comes here, and usually, in the Alekhine, you chase it away, but if you chase it away, you won't be able to play d4. That's annoying. And so if you play a move like d4, which is one of the main lines, although I personally like knight f3 and bishop c4 and delaying it, then black can just take here, and hope that you take back. I don't think taking back is best, but hope that you take back, and then there's no pawn to attack the knight. And so it just kind of rules the roost here in the center of the board. Black will later play d6, and if you trade, let's just say they play d6 right away, and we got a position like this. This would be black's favorite position. White has an isolated pawn, and black can kind of play against it all game. Of course, the theory on this is not quite that. Black is actually not threatening to take because the knight will be hanging. So white can be very coy and play knight f3 first and try to take back potentially with a knight, and then knight c6, and then like a big line goes bishop c4, knight b6, and bishop b3, and white tries to sacrifice the pawn. Black probably shouldn't take. If they take this, they're like a pawn down according to the computer, and in this horrible position because white's just active pieces are just crushing black. So you can test black, and they have to say the magic word, which is d5, and then they tend to be okay, and play is about even. The main line I think goes pawn takes, queen takes, and then castles, and it's a game, very complicated game. So that's the C3 Sicilian. I think it's really good because most players that play black that are not really booked up, that are in the lower ranks, will not know to play knight f6 or d5. And if they don't play one of those moves, then white tends to be better. There are other lines, like you can play e6 or g6, but those positions are fine for white. So like d4, d5. At the very least, white can play an exchange variation with, an advanced French with e5. But they also have other options like taking or knight d2, saddling you with an isolated pawn. So they have some options against those. Okay, so I've gone over the sideline c3, b4, and d4. Now let's turn to kind of a cool sideline I like myself, which is like basically a Philidor. So what I do is I play knight f3 sometimes, and then they play knight c6, would be normal, thinking they're going to play here, or perhaps d4 or d6. And I play c3 now. And the idea is to play d4. Same idea as before. And now d5 is kind of off the table because there'd just be a tempo down on the c3 Sicilian. So knight f6 is on the table. Now the advantage here for black, as opposed to the c3 system, is that white now can't push. So instead, white plays bishop e2 and can set this little trap that after knight takes pawn, boom! They lost a knight. But of course, that's just hope chess. Black does not have to fall into it and can play like g6. And after castle kingside, bishop g7, eventually black will castle. And white will be required to play like d3. And you can play a move like d3, knight d2, and you're kind of in an old Indian, which I love. I'll play an old Indian all day. And it can kind of surprise black to have you like playing on the queen side like this. As a kind of nice out-of-book opening. The main line here goes bishop b5 check, and trying to like trade the bishops, and then you're able to guard the pawn with your rook now. But the line is fine for black too. It's not very forcing. Again, when white's not opening up the position, they can't really count on too much of an advantage. But nonetheless, a nice tricky sideline for white, in addition to the ones I talked about. Let's talk about the Grand Prix. So the Grand Prix the idea is to play knight c3 and then f4. And black has a number of responses. It used to be that f4 used to be the Grand Prix, to just kind of play this and to kind of create a pawn chain this way, and then just like go all in against black, which makes sense, right? Because black's going to try to win the endgame, so like you're just like attacking. But then d5 was considered to be a really good response. After all, if you take and you take this queen, this pawn is just kind of dangling out there. It has no purpose. And if white castles, there's going to be all kinds of checks on that annoying diagonal. Black's pawn is also dangling out there, but it's a lot more useful. It's like holding back this pawn, and it doesn't weaken the king in the slightest. And it doesn't, this bishop is really bad. Well, this bishop can still come to d6 and is just a hair better. So it's just a lot less weakening. So that's why f4 kind of vanished from the stage, and knight c3 first to stop d5, and then play f4 kind of arose. So the main line goes knight c6 back, and black tries to stay flexible, because if white misplays it, they might go for d5, and maybe they don't want to play d6 if they can play d5 in one move. And then it used to go f4, and then g6, knight f3, bishop g7. Bishop c4 was the old main line, but they found that if black just rushed e6, d5, e6, knight g7, d5, white basically didn't have much. It was just a nice block. So then people started putting it on b5. This was recommended in like a book by Eugene Pearlstein and Roman Gentiavili, both grandmasters. They recommended this setup. And then black has to know what to do, because what white's going to do is take this knight, and then they don't have a bad bishop. And then they'll play d3, castle kingside. They'll move the queen on over, and they'll be like red rover. And at one point, they'll play f5, and the bishop will come in, and they'll just attack with everything. And then the other rook will come over, and that's the idea. So they're just going to like go all in the attack. The only one who's not contributing to an attack, that has a hard time contributing, is this bishop. Because if it goes here, it gets bonked by a d-pawn. And if it goes here, it's just kind of in the way of everything, and it doesn't do much. So like they want to trade this off as the goal. And therefore, black's move knight d4 makes sense, just kind of stopping everything. And we're in for you know, a quieter game. This is an annoying move. There's a lot more theory here that you'd have to know. Of course, white has not given up. There's like white can still play for kind of an advantage. There's some like trends in the Grand Prix. Like Eugene Pearlstein recommended the move a4. It's kind of funny because like the idea is that e6 is actually bad for black because of e5, and then the lines get complicated. And d6 is complicated because of bishop b5 and no knight jump. So they like move tricked black into making a waiting move that wasn't good. And of course, knight f6 is not possible because of e5. It's too early. So like black is really tempted to move one of these pawns, and both of those are bad. Now, of course, black can just make a waiting move back, like Schenklin, I think, recommends b6, and just giving it back to white to see if he's going to put the bishop, or she's going to put the bishop on there or there, and then, you know, you're back to the normal things. But it's a tricky line. Other players, like, you know, Cry and his Chess Dojo are recommending a different approach. This is also recommended by Gowan Jones in Coffeehouse Repertoire, is to just, like, go for rapid development. And the idea is that if they let us, we take the knight, and then we play the normal thing. We play the Grand Prix. So they're going to play here. But unlike before, since we haven't committed to f4, white can play here and just argue that they have 3 pieces out to black's 1. And that can be very dangerous for black. In fact, a common mistake is to take the bishop, and black is only winning 26% to white's 54% if you take the bishop. So black has to be super, super careful here. Best is to kind of like keep this in tension and either play a move like e6 or even like a6 is fine. Kick the bishop back to d3 and then play a move like g6 and bishop g7. You can even play knight c6, which is kind of funny. It messes with white because their goal is often to take, play this up, play f4. And then black should be fine. The knight is very nice. It's a very nice knight. And if white ever takes, it's just one more center pawn in the position and an open c file yet again. However, white still has 3 pieces to black's 1. So they're both kind of making their arguments, and it's anyone's game. This is a nice sideline that I would recommend, especially since if black doesn't know it, they're doomed. Finally, we get into the closed. So d3, g3, bishop g2. Those are really good. That's like Karpov style. It's more positional. White just kind of like gains space on both sides of the board. Plays tends to be non-forcing, and I like it if you don't like a lot of theory. There are, of course, lines you can memorize as white that are dangerous for black. Typically speaking, black will go for a rush on that side versus white going for a rush on the other side. And usually white fianchettoing is like a peace offering because the bishop doesn't attack the king side. So they're more just like gaining space. They're just more like squeezing black with this slow buildup on the king side to like make sure their king can't go into the game and in games. And it makes it so the in games are not so lopsided in black's favor. Also a nice option with you know, a little less theory. There's just lots of ways for white to play it with an immediate g3, a knight on f3 or a knight on e2, and so on and so forth. White can also finally play bishop e2 and then like a d3 f4 idea. This is kind of a reverse English compared to what I recommend in my old Indian course. And it's out of book, and I'd recommend it because it's, you know, it's not better for white or anything, but it's again tactical. Okay, so now let's go into the main lines. And in fact, this video has been pretty long, so I'm going to break it into 2 videos. I'm going to release them both simultaneously, but that way I can give a break for those who are done. So this was Sicilian Sidelines, and in my next video we'll go over the main line. Hopefully this gives you a good idea of of some of the options that white has of deviating early, and next we'll talk about the big kahuna.